Okay, hi everybody. My name's Liz Fenton, and I'm here with Lisa Steinke. We are best friends and also the authors of 7 novels, including How to Save a Life, this enormous poster behind myself and Lisa. That comes out July 14th, and it's a dark, heart-pounding love story with a Groundhog Day twist that you can pre-order at Warwick's. And how convenient that we are partnered with Warwick's, and we have Julie here to talk about Warwick's.
There we go. Thanks, Liz. And thank you to Liz and Lisa for this wonderful couch surfing idea. I know that most of the people in the room here have come to these before, but if you haven't, Warwick's is an independent bookstore that is located in La Jolla, San Diego, California. We are actually now open for business. So if you're in the San Diego area, you can come and see us and browse around and buy some books. We're doing mask and social distancing, so we're doing everything safe. But if you would prefer to order online, I like to say any way that you can get a book, you can get it from Warwick's. Like everybody else, we need your book orders. So if you're thinking about buying anything tonight, or if you have some other things on your idea list, buy from Warwick's. As Liz mentioned, I'll be putting in the comment section how to buy the books. And Susie, we are so happy to have you here at Warwick's with the Couch Surfing Book Tour. And with that, I will pass it back to Liz.
Thank you. Well, let me tell you, yes, Susie, obviously we're so happy to have you, but let me tell you guys a little bit about Susie. She is the author of 4 novels, On Grace, The Balance Project, The Subway Girls, and We Came Here to Shine, which just published this past Tuesday. Susie's writing has appeared in numerous publications, including the New York Times, the Huffington Post, Pop Sugar, Writer's Digest, and Glamour. Susie grew up in Los Angeles, graduated from the University of Pennsylvania, and now lives just outside New York City with her husband and their 3 teenage sons. So welcome, Susie. And I'm going to pass you to the lovely Lisa, who is going to put you in the hot seat.
Lovely. I got a lovely description this evening. We've only done about 45 of these. It's about time you complimented me. Thank you. Hi, Susie.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me. Julie, I don't know where you went, but thank you so much for doing this. And Liz and Lisa, who are book champions galore and who I've known for years. Hi, there you are. I feel like I've known you guys for years now, just through the internets. And then I got to meet Liz in person in San Diego. You moderated an event for me, which was so much fun. And we were drinking Bloody Marys.
We were, girl.
So I'm so excited to be here with you guys. It's an exciting week, launch week, where we came here to shine. Yay. And anyway, thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. Happy Pub Day 2 days ago. This is awesome. We Came Here to Shine has been getting amazing reviews. Travel and Leisure called it one of the most anticipated books of 2020. Fiona Davis said it burst like a Technicolor movie right off the page, left me breathless. I love that one. And Publishers Weekly raved that it's an engrossing period piece that offers 2 characters worth rooting for. I want you to tell us what it's about, but first I just want to let everyone know that we have some photos that correlate with the book and the research that Susie did. Yes. So as she's talking, we'll bring some of those up. So I just wanted to, the screen will go to a photo for a little while and then it'll go back.
Yeah, so do you want me to pull that up now, Lisa?
Well, I think she's gonna, maybe when she's talking about what the book's about, maybe those first 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, We Came Here to Shine is uplifting historical fiction, and I specify it's uplifting because it's not war historical fiction. It's actually happy historical fiction, and it's set at the 1939 New York World's Fair. Oh wait, go back to like.
I know, yeah.
She's you're jumping the gun, but it's okay.
Fine, sorry.
That's okay.
She'll get there. This is her characters. No.
Yeah, no, slide one.
This is the right one, but she was going to get there. When she starts talking about the characters, then we got this, guys. Okay. Don't worry. We're a smooth operation over here.
How pretty are they? So it's uplifting historical fiction set at the 1939 New York World's Fair, which was in Queens, New York. And it focuses on 2 main characters who both find themselves, against their wishes, working at the fair for the summer. and pursuing their personal and professional dreams against some pretty heavy obstacles. And the third character is really the fair itself, as I take the reader behind the scenes of the iconic and extraordinary fair. So the first main character is Vivi, and these are my inspiration shots for Vivi. She was inspired by Esther Williams, who is the woman on both of the two right-hand pictures, who is a swimmer. So Vivi in the story is a Hollywood actress who's just about to start her first starring role when she's plucked from her movie set and sent by the studio head to New York to star in the Aquacade. She is not necessarily a synchronized swimmer, but due to situations beyond her control, she's plopped down into this humongous synchronized swimming spectacular production, and she is meant to perform, and if she does well, she's promised an opportunity to go back to her role in Hollywood. And the second main character is plucky Max, and you can put up the next slide, Liz. Max is inspired by Katharine Hepburn, Emma Stone. So you picture a young woman who will not wear a dress and who is very bold and ambitious and speaks her mind. And Max is a journalism student who is in a very prestigious program at NYU, and she's being placed into an internship. And all she wants is to work at the New York Times and write hard news. But her professor puts her at a placement at Today at the Fair, which was an actual newspaper of the New York World's Fair. So you have these two characters who find themselves at the fair. They eventually meet, and that's where the fun begins.
So what made you choose the World's Fair as the event you want to write about? Like, what's that backstory? I'm always curious with historical fiction authors, like how they choose their setting.
Well, my first two books, On Grace and The Balance Project, are contemporary fiction. And when I got the idea, that's a picture of the World's Fair. It was 1,200 acres. And for comparison's sake, Disney World is like 400 acres. So the World's Fair was enormous, and that doesn't even show the whole thing. But you can just stay on that for a minute. I got the idea when I was reading, I have props, I was reading Esther Williams' autobiography called The $1 Million Mermaid. And Esther Williams was a swimmer, and she swam, I'm reading this, and I get to the part where she's talking about, she's swimming in the 1940 Aquacade at the Golden Gate Exposition, which was the San Francisco World's Fair. And I'm reading this, and I come across the word Aquacade, and I'd never seen that word before in my life. So I go on to Google, and I look up Aquacade, and I find out what it was, that it was a $1 million+ synchronized swimming spectacular, and that it was the highest grossing attraction at the New York World's Fair. It started off at the Cleveland World's Fair, or the St. Louis, I always get those two mixed up, in 1937, and it moved to New York in 1939. And so as soon as I read that and read about Esther Williams' experience with that, I just thought it would make a really fascinating premise for a novel, and thought it would be so much fun to drop a character into the Aquacade, into the World's Fair. And there was so much richness and color and intrigue at the fair that I just thought that it could provide a lot of fodder for a story.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you explained what Aquacade is, because when I was reading, that's a word I'd never seen before. So
yeah, and there's a picture, Liz, you have a picture of it, and if you go to that, I think it's the third or fourth slide.
Yeah, it's photo 4.
So if you think of SeaWorld, then instead of the dolphins, there are swimmers. So this is the Aquacade. So on the left, you can see the seating. It's at 10,000 people. In the middle is a pool, which I think was around 275 feet long, with a stage behind it and a stage in front. There were 100+ swimmers and 100+ dancers. You can see on the left, that's what they called a diving tower. There's a same one on the right. And those contained diving boards, which you can kind of see jutting out. But there was an entire orchestra on the bottom level. And on the other side, there was a glee club. And what else is interesting that you can see in this picture is, I'm pointing at it, not like you can see me. So if you look to the left, the left of the pool, right under the orchestra, you'll see kind of like a garage door sort of thing.
I see it, yeah.
Which is not obviously hard. That was where the swimmers swam to go off stage. So they didn't get out, they didn't like push themselves out of the side of the pool. They swam underneath that and came around backstage. And just a side story, I mean, we haven't even gotten into anything yet, but it's just such a fascinating story that in real life, the male star of the Aquacade was Johnny Weissmuller, who also starred in all the Tarzan movies. He starred in the 1939 Aquacade in New York, and then they moved him, Billy Rose, who was the producer, moved him to San Francisco for the 1940 Aquacade, where he starred with Esther Williams. And she writes about how he used to, once they got underneath that and were out of sight of everybody, he would swim after her and chase her and pull down his own bathing trunks and grope her. And she had to run away. And
I did not think that's where you were going.
So some naughty things happen behind the scenes. And the conceit in my book is the reason that Vivi, who's my Hollywood actress character, the reason that she's sent to the Aquacade from her movie set is because the star of the Aquacade, whose name was Eleanor Holm, who was also a very famous swimmer, an Olympic swimmer, actually. Eleanor Holm, I have her in the book, that she slipped and she broke her ankle or sprained her ankle or something and she couldn't swim. And I got that idea because Esther Williams had to literally run away from Johnny Weissmuller backstage on the slippery pool deck. And so it would have been conceivable that she could have slipped, that Eleanor Holm could have slipped on the pool deck. So that's why her role opens and Vivi is placed into that role.
So isn't the research that gives you the ideas for the details of your characters, like your research gave you the idea to have Vivi work at the Aquacade, is it the same idea to have Max work at the Fair newspaper, or do you think of it before and then try to find those elements within the research?
So this book was interesting because I wrote another book. So I wrote The Subway Girls, which is about the Miss Subways contest, which was an advertising program in the New York City subway system that took on the idea of a beauty pageant. But when I was looking, deciding to write my next book, I had the idea of the Aquacade, and I was also writing about, I wanted to write about the Rye Playland pool, which some of you might know from Tom Hanks in Big, where he goes to get his fortune told, that machine. That's at Rye Playland Boardwalk. So Rye Playland, which is right 10 minutes away from me, has a beautiful old historic Art Deco swimming pool and bathing house. And I wanted to write a book about it. And I wrote the book. The book was kind of a reprisal of the Aquacade, but I was setting it in the 50s. So I spent a year writing that book, and the main character was a journalist, and she was kind of going undercover investigating the graft that was taking place at this revival of the Aquacade, where there was a swimmer named Vivi. That book got put into the proverbial electronic drawer. And when I decided to revamp everything, I decided to place the book itself at the World's Fair back in 1939 and bring those two characters back in somehow. So I knew that I wanted a journalist, and I had done a lot of research on women in journalism in the 20th century, especially focusing on this book, which is called The Good Girls Revolt by Lynn Povich. And some of you might sound familiar because it got made into a TV show called Good Girls Revolt that was on Amazon. That
was a great.
I love that. I wish it had gone another season. I was very into it.
So the story is that the person in charge of development or production at Amazon, which it was an Amazon Prime show, he cut it after one season. He was then fired for sexual discrimination.
Okay.
So he wasn't into like the
so good.
Yeah.
So good. Anyway, we digress.
So I
the
really
newspaper.
have a journalist, but what happened was I was doing my research on the World's Fair, and when I found that there was an actual newspaper at the fair, and you can put the slide up, but I also have this from eBay. This is an actual copy of Today at the Fair, which was an 8-page tabloid-size newspaper published every single day at the World's Fair and sold on the grounds for 5 cents. So that's pictures of the 2 copies that I actually bought off of eBay. And there's this amazing website called 1939nyworldsfair.com, and they have scanned in copies of a bunch of the newspapers that I I read through all of them, and it was so fascinating to read how the news was written at the time, the voice that the news was written in, but also what was covered, what the events were that people came to see at the World's Fair. There's some really corny ones, and it's amazing to see what was popular culture at the time. So as soon as I had some authentic reason for my second character to be a journalist, I just went right with that. And so Max is a journalist at the fair.
That is so, see, I would get down this just rabbit hole if I was a historical fiction writer, which I could never be, but if I was, I know I'd fall down this hole of just reading thing after thing after thing. So like, tell us about your research process, because it's obviously very, very well researched, but how do you navigate that so you don't get lost in it? And how do you decide what to include and what not to include? And
yeah, so it's a great question. So I start off by the reason I chose the Miss Subways contest and the reason I chose the New York World's Fair and the Aquacade is because I could wrap my arms around it. And it's not that there's a limited amount of research, although for the Miss Subways contest, there was a very, very small amount of historic information and archives about it. The World's Fair, obviously, there's so much more, and I certainly didn't read every article or book that was written about it, but I did read a lot of them. And after a while, the main things start repeating themselves, but I read tons of books. That stack right over there is books about the World's Fair for the most part. There's tons of stuff online between New York Times articles in the Times Machine and different magazine articles that are all archived online. And then there's videos. So this guy, Philip Medicus, I think he has 17 reels of video that's all uploaded now to YouTube. So I was able to watch performances of the Aquacade and watch people walking through the fair and see what they were wearing and see how crowded it was and what the landscaping looked like, because they spent millions of dollars. Landscaping was a huge part of it, and the lighting was a huge part, and the color of the building. So obviously these films I think they're still in black and white. I don't remember if they colorized them, but just to be able to see all that. So I did a lot of research that way. I bought a lot of stuff on Amazon, on eBay. So in addition to the Today at the Fair, I bought an actual guidebook from the fair, and you can see that the spine is breaking, but to be able to go through and read about the different things as somebody who would have attended the fair, what they would have read. I also have an actual program from the Aquacade.
Wow.
So this is what you would have bought if you had gone to the Aquacade. And it had I should put a sticky on here, but it has like the program in the middle of what the different numbers are. And so you could follow along as you're watching a show, and there's biographies of all of the stars. And so this is Johnny Weissmuller and Eleanor Holm.
That's Johnny.
There he is.
Yeah,
that's Johnny.
He's pretty hunky. So, so that was fun. I also went to the fairgrounds. So as I said, the 39, and it extended into 1940. That's a whole other story. The 39 and 40 fair was held on the fairgrounds in Forest. Why am I blanking? In Corona Park, Queens, and Flushing Meadows, Corona Park, Queens. I don't know why I had it written. And that was when they chose that site. It was an ash heap, and they cleared the grounds. And it took from the idea of the fair was in 1935, and it opened in 1939. And they cleared this ash heap, and so there was the fairgrounds for 1939 and 40. All of the buildings except for one were designed to be taken down. So they were never meant to be permanent. And then it was turned into a park, and then it was turned into a World's Fair again in 1964 and 1965. And then most of those buildings were torn down. And now this Flushing Meadows is the site of the Billie Jean King Tennis Stadium, where the US Open is played. And also Citi Field is right near there. So that's how a lot of people, it's right near LaGuardia Airport. So that's how a lot of people know it. That's a long introduction to say that I was able to go to Flushing Meadows, Corona Park, have a private tour, and none of the buildings really from 1939 are there, but the paths are all there. So I was able to walk like from where Vivi would have worked in the Aquacade to where Max would have worked in the administration building, and see where the Trilon and Perisphere were, which were the two main architectural icons of the fair, and walk down to where the government zone would have been. And
we have those two pictures of those.
Which ones are
they?
At
the very end, Liz. I think they're 8 and 9.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I just thought
Okay, I love
as you're walking, you can show what you saw.
And I gave you a blurry picture, so that is my fault. But that's the Trilon in the Perisphere. The Trilon, they say it's 700 feet, but I think other things that I read say they ran out of money and they ran out of time, so it ended up being 610 feet. That's the piercing structure, and then the Perisphere is that ball, and inside. Inside the ball was an actual exhibit called Democracy, and you went on like this moving carpet around a model utopian city of the future, because the theme of the World's Fair was the world of tomorrow, so it was all about technological innovation in the future. So it's really cool.
Oh yeah, I mean, I could just listen to you talk about that all day.
This is This is from the amusement zone. So the fair was broken into 7 zones. Everything from the government zone to the food zone to the production zone, and depending upon the zone, that was the focus of the buildings. And that was, from what I read, this was the first World's Fair that actually broke itself down in that way to make it more navigable for the attendees. Because it was so large, they wanted to divide it, which is pretty smart and seems pretty obvious to us right now, but I guess at the time it wasn't. There were actual like push carts that American Express was the sponsor of, that like little things that a guide in it would be a handsome man in a pith helmet. It's in my book. He would push you on these guide chairs. So that was one way to get around. There were also buses that would take you around. But so this is the amusement zone, and this is the Lifesavers parachute jump, sponsored by Lifesaver. And this has a big role in the book, which I won't talk about, but there were 12 parachutes, and you went up, and then you'd reach the top, and then you'd float down. And it was a very popular ride, and it is now, this particular structure is now at Coney Island in New York. So it had a life.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So much cool history with this. So yeah, so you originally asked me the question, what kind of research I did. That's pretty much, the books, the videos, this one website, 1939 nyworldsfair.com, which I told you about, which is so robust and comprehensive. So it was just, I did a ton of research at the beginning, just so I could put myself in the right framework and understand what I wanted to write about. And then during the writing, I would constantly be going back, if they would go to a restaurant, I would want to look up what it was on the menu of that restaurant, all that stuff, or what would this person have worn, or my character Vivi is living at a hotel in New York City. Well, did they have phones in the room? So, I'm constantly doing research as I'm writing and editing, just to make sure that the other tricky part is that I want to share all the research in the book, but I didn't want to make it too expository. And it's funny because one of the complaints that I saw in a review was that there wasn't enough about the fair. And I actually had more, and in the editing, we cut it out because we didn't want to bore people with so it was
yeah, it's that balance of how much, I never thought about that, but like how much.
So that you're not saying, oh, and there was a government zone and this was in the government zone. I actually had to have my characters go to the government zone, and what did they see and what did they point out, so that it made sense that I was explaining the fair.
Yeah, I never thought about that, from the author's point of view on historical fiction, of just what having it be too too much history versus just story. And so that's fascinating to think about.
I mean, I'm imagining it's a balance. I'm going to break in here. Leslie is saying, Susie, your artifacts are so cool. Also that she loves your office and she attends every event of yours so she can stare at the wallpaper.
Oh my God,
it is very
thank you, Leslie. I don't know where you are on here. Oh, I see your pretty picture. Thank you, Leslie. That's so nice. I love this wallpaper. When I saw it, I was like, okay, I have to put that in my office, because as listed at the beginning, I live with 4 males. I have 3 boys and a husband, and this is my very feminine room.
I love it. Oh, and she also saying you look like Kristen Bell. She's trying to think of who you looked like all week.
You do, actually.
God,
I can see it.
Leslie, I'm going to be your best friend. That is so nice. Thank you. I'll take that. Thanks. I think she's so cute.
We have a request from Barbara. She wants to see Johnny Weissmuller's picture again. She missed it.
I mean,
let's see that. Sexual
and he kind of has his swimsuit kind of looks like what he wore in Tarzan too. I wonder if it's the same. Sorry, Susie has to talk, so picture will come
That's
up,
okay.
right?
Oh.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so I'll talk. So if you have me on speaker, this is Johnny. And if you go on to Google and you look up Johnny Weissmuller, 2 L's, then you can see all the photographs you want. He was a very strapping man. He was married multiple times, and his marriage and his is in the book too. And there's some interesting, if all this stuff is entertaining to you, then you got to get Esther Williams' autobiography, because she spills the tea, people. She is,
Ooh.
and she was very interesting because she dealt with a lot of sexual discrimination and sexual harassment, which of course it wasn't called at that time. It was just called living. And she talks about it, and she talks about her reactions to it and how she didn't put up with it. And so it's really, really interesting because you get a really good perspective of a woman of that time in the 40s. She was 19 in 1940. What she would have dealt with. So she was born in like 1920. So she'd be 100 now.
That is fascinating. Julie, I don't know if you guys are able to view carry that, but if you do carry that, if you could put a link up in the chat. And then also don't forget that you can ask questions in the chat, or make comments, like tell us who we look like, what celebrities we look like. That's fine too, as long as it's someone good. And I just wanted to remind everybody that you can do that in the chat.
Yeah, please do, because I'm sure your questions from readers are always more interesting, I think. But
yeah, I love the questions. Bring them on. I don't feel like you guys are interrupting. I think it's really interesting.
How about a plot? Your actual story. Do you know how it's going to end? Do you have it all mapped out along with your research, or are you just kind of like, I've got these 2 women and I've got the World's Fair and I'm just gonna go?
I'm a plotter.
Okay.
I am all about the plotting, and I spend more time on the plotting and the outlining than I do writing my first draft. I like to know where the book is going to go. I like to make sure that it's hitting all of the beats that are kind of, I would say, required for commercial fiction to be readable and to have the right pace. I do think that there are certain things that you as a writer are responsible, you need to do to carry your reader along. So yes, I definitely do. However, I get pretty, I do it all longhand when I'm plotting and outlining.
What?
Yes,
okay.
I have stacks.
Girl.
Figure that out for my next talk. I have like stacks of notebooks, and I think better when I'm writing. And there's something, if there are any teachers on here, unmute yourself, because there's something like the whole shame that children aren't taught cursive anymore, because there's something in the brain. Danny, you're nodding. Are you a teacher?
Well, I have to unmute them. Sorry, I'm kind of.
Okay, no, that's okay.
I
can
totally unmute them.
There's something in the brain that when you're writing, your brain is different than when you're typing, which is why, like, to this day, I can't take notes on a computer. I have to, like, if I'm listening to a lecture, not like I really listen to lectures, but anyway, so that's beside the point. So I did all the plotting, and I end up getting down to the chapter level. So I will know what I need to accomplish in every chapter. And I also, because I have 2 perspectives, I have Vivi, it's alternating chapters. So Vivi is odd chapters, and Max are the even chapters, and sometimes they come together in one chapter together. That happens. But I needed to make their stories parallel. They both needed to hit certain beats at the same time. And so I needed to kind of know when that was going to happen. If I just sat down and started writing, then how was I going to make that work? But what always happens with every single book I've written is that halfway through the writing, because I don't get too granular in my plotting, halfway through the writing, as I'm actually writing, everything changes. And I have to go back and change the ending. But I do know from the beginning where the book is going to go. But this book, not only did I change the ending from how I envisioned it, but I changed it, I think, 1 or at least 2 more times in the editing process.
That is fascinating, although I'm not surprised that you do it that way, just because you are very buttoned up and you're very efficient. And I could just see, like, going to your website. She has all kinds of additional resources, by the way, you guys, on her website, which I appreciate. I'm just someone that if I read a book like yours, then I'm going to want to go and read all these other books and learn more things.
Yeah, so I curated that for all of you. So you don't have to go onto Google, just go onto my website, onto the page for this particular book for We Came Here to Shine, and there's a whole site of historical reference, and I put a lot of links and also a ton more information that is not included with the book. And I think Lisa and Liz, no, you guys got not the ARCs, you got the real copies, because
I got the real thing right here.
Yeah. In the back of the real thing, there's the historical note. It's unfortunate because all of, like, on NetGalley and all the Goodreads giveaways, those don't have the historical note. And so I think people must be unmoored because there's so much that's explained in the historical note about what was real and what was not. And so that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and there's a reading group questions in here too, which is awesome.
Because it talks a lot about, I have this layer of not in your face and not preachy, but a layer of feminism in there, in that the way that Liz and Lisa meet, that Vivian and Max meet is, well, I'm not going to give it away, but I bring in this character who is an activist with the National Women's Party, which was a real activism group at the time. And so there's a reason for them to talk about women kind of stepping outside of their traditional and sanctioned roles of being wives and mothers, and what if we want more, and what if we're ambitious. And there's sort of the historical level of that activism and what was era appropriate that I kind of bring into it.
I see, there's so much that goes into this book. I love it. And let's talk about this cover for a minute. How involved were you in the design? If you can tell everybody a little bit about that. It's an amazing cover.
So it's interesting. I kind of feel a little bit guilty about telling this story, but and maybe when I'm done telling the story, you can let me know from a professional perspective if I shouldn't tell it. And here I am.
Okay.
So I'm very lucky because, and you guys would I'm curious how involved you guys are, but with my particular publishing house, they give me a lot of involvement in our cover design. And so it starts off by, and I really want a cover that I can be proud of and that I can love and that I could want to go around the country when there was such thing as going around the country and showing off, that this is the cover of my book. So I send like a whole cover brief on kind of what I envision, not taking the role of telling a book designer what route she or he should take, because there's a lot that goes into design of a book in addition to marketing and sales and knowing the genre and the target audience and all that. But I kind of give a little bit of these are the types of book covers that I love. And anyway, I got a bunch of book covers back that in different rounds, it took several months, that just weren't hitting the right, it just wasn't right. The women that were on the covers were from the wrong era, or they were wearing wool suits, or in one, the background scene was from Coney Island and not from the World's Fair. And so it just wasn't, and I was getting very frustrated. So I went on to the New York Public Library's photo archives, because they have an entire archive from the New York World's Fair of photographs, 13,000 photographs, I think. And I found a bunch of pictures that I loved. And this one was my favorite. And I mocked it up on Canva in the black and white, and I sent it to them, and they loved it too. And they got it colorized, and they did the graphic design, and that's how we got the cover. So is that okay to tell out loud? Because I kind of designed the cover.
That you kind of designed the cover. I would tell that story. I would run around town and tell that story.
That's a good
all
story.
Over the place. It is a very good story.
Okay. I'm not trying to make them look bad. You know what I mean?
No, I think you're very involved. It shows how passionate you are about the whole package, which I think is just.
I'm not sure that the graphic designers always read the books that they work on, because they're probably many books.
I don't think so.
I know they get a briefing on it, but so it's not necessarily the graphic designer's fault that it didn't start off with good rounds, but I decided to instead of keep waiting for something to come that was going to be good, I decided to just take matters into my own hands, and now I'm glad.
Well, it's all in the cover. I mean, it's what a reader is going to first see and think, okay, do I want to pick that up, or do I want to click on that?
Right.
Amy is saying, love the cover, a 5-star arc for me.
Thank you.
And Judy said, we've got a couple comments here. Let me get in here.
People
Judy says,
it's good.
I know. I think you should tell that story too, Susie. It shows you are dedicated to the history of the story. Great cover.
Thank
Leslie is saying that's what makes historical fiction book a great read for me is the effort and research the author puts into it.
Mm-hmm.
Any author can write a fiction story and place it from a long time ago, but to truly live in the time of the story makes all the difference, and that's why I can't wait to read this book.
Thank you. Thank you. And that's so nice. And that's some of the feedback that I've been getting is that people really feel like they are at the World's Fair and they get to see all of that. And what I think I'm going to do too, like for Amy, I think I'm going to try to get my historical note on my website. So readers who, and if you email me, Amy, through my website, through my contact page, that comes directly to me. I'll just email you the historical note. Because I have different historical stuff on the website in the historical section, but not the actual historical note that is in the back of the book.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Because I'm always go right there after this because I want to know, how much of this. And a lot of times, like, I don't even know anything. And I'm just so like, it's the first time I'm really hearing anything about, something in historical fiction. So definitely do that. What about the title?
The title, that's another interesting thing. So my working title was The Summer of Tomorrow. And for people who have read the book already, the theme of the World's Fair, as I said, was the world of tomorrow. And so I thought The Summer of Tomorrow, that's a great title. But the sales team at my publisher thought that wasn't such a good title. So we went back and forth, and there were all these different New York summer, like all these different titles the Summer at the Fair, like all these different things. But We Came Here to Shine eventually was the one that sales and marketing chose. And I like it. I'm getting used to it. I still like The Summer of Tomorrow, but I can imagine that somebody who doesn't know the premise of that might be a little bit confused.
Yeah, I think I mean, I know, I always get used to the title that
like
the only title I know.
Like,
so for me, right.
Like you're naming your baby X, but then like I meet baby X, I'm like, I love baby X, and that's the only thing that he should have, or she should have, or they should have.
Amy's chiming in. She says, thanks so much that she wanted to grow up and be Esther Williams.
Okay, then you have to read this book, Amy. I promise you. And there's even pictures. It's just so good. And what she lived through in her life is fascinating. She really had to deal with a lot of diversity. Look at how cute she was. Oh, and here's the picture of her swimming with Johnny.
Oh, Johnny again. What's going on under that water?
Yeah. Can I tell the story of the map?
Yes, that is exactly what I was about to ask you. So we're right.
It's slide
like,
6.
Okay, synchronized swimmers.
Don't show that. Make sure you show the first map.
Yeah, show the
is it slide 6?
It's 6.
Okay, so I really felt like it was important to include a map in the book to orient the reader, because there are so many places, and I just thought it would be a better experience for the reader if she or he or they could have some sort of context of where they were on the grounds. This, and I actually have the original one from eBay, this is a map that was included in a copy of the New Yorker. It was a free section in the New Yorker. But you can see in the index all the different buildings, and you can see on the grounds there were hundreds of different buildings over these 1,200 acres. And I knew that this would reprint very, very poorly on a 2-page spread in a book. And I also knew that it would be way too confusing because I didn't need to highlight all of those buildings. And how was I going to, I couldn't even get the rights for this. I tried actually to get the rights to recopy this. Anyway, so then I decided to commission a custom map. And I first went on Etsy and I looked at the wedding map designers, who do the invitations, and I interviewed some of those designers. But then I actually found an illustrator on Instagram, and it turned out she was from Milan, Italy. Her name is Silvia Guerra, and she's so talented. And I ended up working with her, and we went back and forth for a few months, where at first I sent her a map like this, and then I sent her photographs and images of the 10 to 15 locations that I wanted to highlight. Different pavilions, the Billy Rose Aquacade, places that Max and Vivi visit at the fair in the book. And then she developed the whole wayfinding strategy for it. And so now you can go to the next slide, and she designed a custom map, and this is what it looks like. And so
cool.
Yeah, so you can see on the far left, you can see Max in her trousers, and she's working there at the administration building. And if you just go all the way to the right, you'll see Vivi in her swimsuit. and she's swimming at Billy Rose's Aquacade. And then different places that when you read the book, you'll see up top, like I mentioned the French Pavilion and the Italian Pavilion and the Lagoon of Nations, where there's a fireworks show every night at 9 o'clock. And the Trilon and Perisphere are right there in the center. So you can see different places that they go, and you'll be able to see, oh, well, when she enters at the Corona Gate, and then she has to cross up, go by the Trilon and Perisphere, over the bridge into the Aquacade, like you can see what that means.
When first of all, I love that you commissioned someone to do the map. I just think that's amazing. I also want to mention, said it earlier, but this and a lot of other pictures are included in the front of the book, which is nice for reference as you're reading. Yeah. But I wanted to go back just really quick when you're talking about walking, how far is that? I know it's acres, but like how vast and far is that for a walk? Like, could they even do things on opposite sides of the fair in the same day, or?
Yeah, I mean, people would have spent a whole day at the fair and they wouldn't have been able to see everything.
Right.
It's like, so it was 1,200 acres total. It would have been less than a mile to walk from, I think it was less than a mile, like across, and then less than a mile front to back. But, 15 minutes or so to walk across, and then 15 minutes or so to walk, or maybe longer to walk from front to back.
This seems like a big area to put down for just like a one time. How long did it last? How long was the fair there?
So the fair was only supposed to last for the 1939 season. It opened on May 1st or April 30th. And it was meant to close in the middle of October. It opened April 30th, 1939. It was meant to close in October, but they had been anticipating, and their P&L projected 50 million visitors. And as the summer went on, it was clear that they were not going to reach that. They could tell the weather was not so good. They got a lot of complaints for the admission price, which was 75 cents, which was about $18, that for the typical American family, it was too expensive. Especially, this is 1939. This is like, the Depression is still, and so they ended up only getting 25 million, which was half of the visitors projected. And the concessionaires and the sponsors of the fair were like, well, we need to recoup the money that we spent. So they extended the fair for a second summer. So it started again in May, I think, of 1940 and ended in October of 1940. But then, they tore all those buildings down, which was...
Right. I mean, that's what I find it's like a thing back in the day to kind of do that, Chicago. And it's just fascinating to me that it would go up and then it would go down.
Yeah. Got a few comments. Lisa, I'm giving you the signal.
Okay, I see it. I see the signal. I see them come in, but then I'm trying to listen, so I'm letting you do it.
Chris says, I loved Esther Williams' memoir, and that's what drew her to the E-Arc. And then Nicola says, my favorite reads are historical fiction. I'm looking forward to reading my first book by Susie. So you have a new reader. Yeah. And then your girl Leslie says, that map's amazing. What a wonderful idea. I love reference points in a book, especially since I am horrible with directions and distances.
Thank you, Leslie. Yes, I am a very visual learner, and so it just helps me. So thank you.
I also love that you have the fun facts on your the fun facts about the fair on your website that weren't included in the book. Are there any that you can tell us about?
That's funny. I have to study those. I think, well, one of them was that it was very cold, and so they had to improve the heating of the pool because the swimmers were too cold, and they had to bring them coffee. And I actually mentioned that in the book, and because their dressing room was very dank. It was like, imagine, a public pool dressing room, how it's like cinder block walls, and that's kind of where, so it was wet on the ground, and they were all very, very cold. But they had to do 4 shows a day. I think 3:30, 5:30, 8, and 10, or something like that.
Wow.
So there's also a lot of, it's interesting, the ministrations of hair and makeup. And I put that into the book, but that all comes from what I learned from Esther Williams. She goes into great detail about how they would have to, I think it was a combination, now I'm forgetting, I think it was baby oil and Vaseline that they put in their hair.
Oh.
Because they didn't wear caps for every number. Some of the numbers, they just had their hair. And so they had, I think it was baby oil and Vaseline in a big vat, and they would have to put it in their hair and comb it and put their barrettes in and all that. And the makeup also, because it had to be waterproof, and there was, it wasn't like today where there was all this waterproof makeup. So they had it was like, I don't even remember what they did, but there was a whole process, and that I talk about that in the book. I have Vivi go through that so that the reader can see what that was like. Trying to think.
I love that. And you have more on your website. I mean, she's, like I said, she has a ton of stuff on. You can get lost over there. I spent a good chunk of my day on that today. It was like, it's great. It's very well set up. So
thank you.
I just have to say. Anything else, Liz, before I keep going?
That's it.
Okay, please feel free, jump in. I mean, I know my questions are good, but I know you guys have good. I know you guys have good questions too. Let's see what I didn't get to yet. I'm just curious what your first, so that you've done 2 books and then you switched to historical fiction. What's the story there?
I'm like you guys, right? We're genre jumpers. So my first 2 books, contemporary fiction, women's fiction, and I kind of, when I was starting out writing fiction, because my background is in marketing and communications, and that's what I did after college. Stopped working full-time when I had my kids. My oldest son is 19, and I started freelancing, writing for articles for websites and magazines, and then just decided to start writing fiction. And what was the question? Oh, and so when I was writing my first book, it was more I was writing about kind of what I knew. And I was writing the story of a woman who is turning 40 and her youngest child is going up to kindergarten. And that was kind of what I was experiencing at the time. And so that was kind of my first novel, which I don't know about you guys, but I'm always a little embarrassed about my first novel. And then my second story, I wanted to talk about work-life balance, because I had been doing the Balance Project interview series, which you guys did like 15,000 years ago. But I was really struggling with work-life balance myself. And so I started asking women who I admired about their experience with work-life balance. And those interviews and the conversations that they sparked inspired my second novel, which is definitely fiction. It talks about work-life balance, but from a fictional perspective. And then I was trying to figure out what to write about for my third book, and I heard an NPR story about the Miss Subways contest, and I was blown away. And I thought it was such a fascinating story that it would make a great premise for a novel. And so it was more that it wasn't so much that I wanted to write historical fiction, it was that I wanted to tell the story of the Miss Subways contest, and in order to do that, I needed to write historical fiction. But I think I'm more like women's fiction, historical women's fiction, because I don't really, I don't talk about wars. I don't really talk about history. It's just that my women's fiction stories are set during a historical period. So they're lighter, they're easier to digest. They're nothing heavy, but they're still, you learn something. And so that's my favorite type of book, is where I can learn something, but still have a story, still feel inspired by the characters and doing lady things and being bold and ambitious. And that's what inspires me. And so that's what I wanted to write about.
Doing lady things. I like
lady
that.
things. That's what everyone wants to read right now. And so it's perfect timing,
Well, and I'm going to jump in too, because I think some of the things that, women trailblazers, I mean, they were doing things back then that, they marched and blazed that trail for us.
Yes, they did.
Sure did. They sure did. They were doing their lady things.
Doing their lady
we kind of talked about writing process, but I just wanted to dive in a little bit more. We talked about research, but what is your, not now during COVID, but in the past, what does your writing setup look like? I mean, are you writing every day? Are you just when you feel it?
Yeah, I'm very much depending upon the stage that I'm in the writing process. So I'm not one of these, hi, Kimberly.
Kimberly just popped on. I saw her too.
Can we unmute
You
her?
like to watch it like me with everybody. I'm Hollywood Squares. I have to see everybody.
Yeah. Hi, Kimberly. Congratulations.
Okay. I'm unmuting her. If you unmute Kimberly, you'll be off. There you go.
I was telling them that you came to my event in Atlanta, and that's where we met in person. There she is.
There she is.
Can you hear? Okay. Anyway, I'll finish answering your question.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't really, I'm very much a cycle, like what's next in the cycle for me. So in other words, I do the research, and all of this started while I was still promoting and traveling and doing events for the Subway Girls, but I'll do the research, I'll write the book, and then I finished this book over a year ago, and I haven't started a new book yet. I meant to several times, but then life kept happening, and then, the pandemic, and so I'm okay with that, because I'm not somebody who wants to publish a book every year. I'm much happier with every 2 years, and maybe even every 3. So I'm planning on getting back to business in September, when my children actually leave the house to go to school, and I'll get my days back. But then I will dive in and go full throttle then.
Is there anything, as we're starting to wind down, is there anything that we missed? I know we had one more picture we didn't show. You tell us, like, what, something else you want to talk about that we maybe didn't cover.
I don't remember. What picture did we
I
miss?
want to know about the time capsule. Sorry.
Yeah, there's a time capsule.
Can I pull that up? Can I pull that up?
Westinghouse. So here's another interesting thing, and this is definitely in the book. So all of the different companies had different exhibits, and Westinghouse was really one of the most, they had such an interesting presence at the fair. First of all, they had something called the Middletons at the fair. So to promote their entire pavilion and what they were doing at the fair, they created a movie called The Middletons at the Fair, which was meant to be a typical American family, and it's an hour-long movie. And it's total propaganda for Westinghouse, but it shows you what it would have been like for a family to go to the fair. And I watched the whole thing, and it's on YouTube, and I linked to it from my website. But the other thing that Westinghouse did was this time capsule, and it's fascinating. They put in like 100 million or something words on microfiche. They put in 100 representative items of the time, from women's grooming items to children's toys to Mickey Mouse things. So anything that would be representative of the time. It was buried in 1938, in September of 1938, and during the so this is when it was buried in September 1938.
And there's no women there, Susie. There's not one.
Women.
I don't see one woman, and it's a very phallic time capsule.
Yes, it's very phallic.
There's a bunch of men sitting around.
But the design of it, it's a special alloy. Like, there's a lot of science behind this, which is why Westinghouse wanted to do it, in terms of what the metal alloy was that they made the time capsule out of, and how it would be protected. But anyway, they at the 1939 fair, you could go and you could look through what they called the well of something, and you look down and you could see the time capsule buried, and then and they had these display cases that showed samples of everything that was in the time capsule, and it's not meant to be open for 5,000 years, which is the year 6939. And
I was just about to ask you, where is it now?
Wow.
Yeah. So
wow.
Actually, they buried another one in 1965 in the same place, and now there's
5,000 years. Someone in a meeting was just like 5,000 years, and they're like,
what they did is they created something called the Book of Record that's at libraries and universities and monasteries all around the world, that kind of explains how to create language. Like, they've thought of all the ways that people will be able to open that time capsule and go back and see what life was like in 1939 for white men, right? And the women who
there's just a bunch of white men standing around a phallic.
Exactly. But Albert Einstein
capsule. Sorry.
You know, they have pictures of Jackie Robinson. Like, it's like it's very interesting what they included. So if you Google what's in the 1939 Westinghouse time capsule, you can see for yourself. It's pretty interesting. Oh, and I did on my Instagram, which is at Susie Schnall, I do something called World's Fair Wednesdays. And I did a whole World's Fair Wednesday about the time capsule. And I actually included some slides that give a list of what was in the time capsule.
Well, that
you're just amazing. Like so thorough. Even that. See, I didn't even get that far. I never got off the website.
Well, one more thing that I'm doing on my Instagram, which is fun, is I partnered up with Aqua Lilies, and the Aqua Lilies are a professional synchronized swimming group, and they perform at parties, and they're in movies. Like, they were in Hail Caesar, the part where Scarlett Johansson plays Esther Williams in that type of Busby Berkeley musical movie. And I am doing these little mini interviews with 6 Aqualilies, one a week, where I talk about like what it's like to be an Aqualily, and I show their pictures. And so, because synchronized swimming, I mean, these women are strong. That is hard to do, to be not only what they call swim pretty, because they're not meant to look athletic. Well, now they're meant to look athletic, but like when Esther Williams auditioned, she was told to not be, she was strong. She auditioned for Billy Rose and she swam across that pool really fast. And he said, no, I need you to swim pretty. That was another title of the book that we didn't end up going with.
Ooh, I like that.
That's good too.
Yeah, that's good
Yeah.
too.
Um,
Okay.
Yeah, so
Did they, I have one more. Can I just, one more little thing?
You're one more.
Yeah. Do you know what I don't think we talked about this. What did they get paid?
yes, I know that. And I don't have a sticky brain for numbers, but I have it written down. So,
And I'm assuming the men, it was higher
yeah,
for the men.
sure. And
Yeah,
that was a big
huge.
scandal because, you know what? It's on my website. It's not in the book.
Okay, well, that's a teaser. We're just going to have to go over the website to find out. 'Cause that's a
okay,
good,
so that was my next. So we're going to wrap up in about 2 minutes and head over to Miss Kimberly Bell. But can you tell us, give us your website, give us all your socials.
It's just
It's in the-
SusieSchnall.com, no Orman, SusieSchnall.com. And there's a tab on the top nav called Books. And then you can click on We Came Here to Shine, or just click on the We Came Here to Shine picture on the front homepage, and that'll take you to the book page. And you'll see little modules, including one called, I think, Fair History or World's Fair History or something. And that's where all...
And you've also put it in the chat. She's put her website in the chat, guys, if you want to go over. And Leslie saying, fabulous interview, Susie. What a night. Susie, Liz, Lisa, and Kimberly. Thanks, ladies.
Love it. I'm gonna stay on.
I just want to really quick, I'm going to jump in before, and I'll be the transition person, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
The book that you showed for Esther Williams, that's an older biography, right? Because
I think she published it in the 80s. Let me look. I'll tell you.
Yeah. So anyways, it's a special order. We might be able to get it for people, but of course we want book sales, but it might be easier for people to get either at a library or something. So I just wanted to let people know that.
1999.
Yeah. So it's going to be a tougher one to get. So it might just be something that you either get at a used store or at a library. And can I just say, I want them to bring, aside from the sexual harassment, I want them to bring back the Ywca, because that looks like it would be so much fun to watch.
I know. They should have it at the San Diego County Fair.
I know.
See that there, right?
Well, you can watch video of it online. I think I even maybe put on my, I'm going to go while
To
you're
see it live would be amazing. I mean, that would just send that audience and watch
Yeah.
that would just be incredible. I mean,
I'm gonna hire those chicks to come be the entertainment at my next party. The ones you can hire that come out. I won't get a band. I'll get that instead.
Susie, it was so great hosting you. Next time you're in San Diego, when we're in a world where we can have people actually do events at the store, we'd love to host you. So
thank you. I would love to come. I appreciate that. I'm going to drop the link to the videos in a minute, but I'm going to stay on. I can't stay on for all of Kimberly's thing, but I'm going to stay on for a little bit because I want to hear about your new book.
Right.
I love your books.
All right, girl. Thank you
Susie.
so
You're
much.
Awesome.
Thank
Don't
you guys
take it
so much for
personally, but
having
I'm
me.
about to mute you. Don't take it
I
personally.
loved it. Thank
that I'm
you.
muting you. Thank you. Okay. It's 5:01, and you know what that means. It is time for Kimberly Bell. So thank you so much for those of you sticking with us, and you won't regret it. Susie, you were amazing. You can't say anything, so I have you on mute, but you were amazing. You can just send kisses. So we're just going to transition right in. I'm going to give Kimberly's bio, and then I'm going to throw it over to Lisa. So Kimberly Bell is the USA Today and internationally best-selling author of 6 novels of suspense. Her third, The Marriage Lie, which Lisa and I love, was a semifinalist in the 2017 Goodreads Choice Awards for Best Mystery and Thriller, and has been translated into a dozen languages. Her latest, Stranger in the Lake, which we also loved, published on June 9th. Before turning to fiction, Kimberly worked in marketing and nonprofit fundraiser. Welcome, Kimberly.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and Julie will put buy links for your books
Yeah, I just want to say real quick too. Hi, Kimberly. Welcome to Warwick's.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I'll put buy links in, and for anybody that wants to get your book, and you guys have a great conversation.
Love it.
And Chris just chimed in and said hi, and she loved your new book in the chat. So what a good way to start. Someone's already read it and loved it.
I know.
That's awesome.
And really quick, and Lisa, if you don't mind, we've had several people pop on. So for those of you just popping on, please feel free to ask questions in the chat. You can ask to be unmuted. You can make comments. You can have conversations with other people. We love when you participate. This is a very interactive conversation. So please feel free to interact with us there. And like, as I mentioned again, there will be buy links for all the books, whether it was Susie's books or Kimberly's books or our books or any books that are mentioned on this call. We'll put buy links in the chat as well.
Yeah, and please do ask questions, because I have mine, but they're always so good from readers. So don't hesitate to jump in. Yeah, please don't. We want this. We want you to engage. Hi, Kimberly.
Hi, how are you?
Hi. Oh, you popped into a different section of my computer. I was looking over here, and then you moved up there. Congratulations on the publication of your book.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's doing really well already, and it's getting amazing reviews. Samantha Downing had this to say about Stranger in the Lake. She says it's a spellbinding tale of lies and deceit that unfolds piece by devastating piece. Another outstanding novel by Kimberly Bell, masterfully written to lure you in and never let go.
Yay.
It's pretty good.
That's a good blurb.
Yeah, and Samantha Downing, I mean, she's amazing. So what is Stranger in the Lake about? Let's just start there.
So Stranger in the Lake is about a woman who she marries way up. She's grown up really rough, and her mother is an addict, her father is in prison, and she meets this man. She lives in a very small town.
I think we're losing you a little bit.
Ywca, you broke up broke up just for a second. Start back at what the woman that married up. Start there.
So Charlotte, my main character, she marries way up. Am I good?
Yeah.
I think you're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
She marries way up, meets a man. He's much older. He's much wealthier. And they fall in love and get married. Am I still good?
You're good.
You're good. Okay, good.
You're
Sorry.
good.
And she meets a man, they fall in love, they get married, and despite all their differences, they're very happy until one morning she wakes up and discovers a lake, a body floating in the lake behind her house. And
yes, show us.
In the lake. And as it turns out, the stranger is not so much of a stranger. It's a woman that she had seen her husband talking to the day before. But of course, he has all sorts of excuses and denials, and things just really unravel from there. And really, she has to discover, does she trust her husband? Was he telling the truth?
It was
the
really
person
good.
that she thought she married.
It was really, really good. I read it a while back, but it is an amazing book. Always curious about the ideas, and how authors come up with them. So what sparked this story?
So a couple of things. I've wanted to write a story set on a lake for a while now. I grew up in the South. I live in the South. You have tons of these kind of lakes here, very remote, small town. And here in the South, at least, most of these lakes are man. There's stuff underneath. Am I falling away again?
You did again.
There, you're back. You're back.
You're back now. You're back now.
What's happening? So where leave off? These lakes. Am I still here? If this happens again, I'll go find another spot, but I might have to call back in.
You're are you at the lake now? Are you in the mountains?
I'm not the lake, but I'm going to move really close to my Wi-Fi.
Yeah, do that, just because I know that's got to be hard to have to stop and start.
I know.
for
Sorry.
you?
So
No.
I don't know where I left off, but I'll just start and say, so
You've always wanted to write
yes,
a book
I
set
always
of the
wanted
lake.
to write a story set on a lake. Most of the lakes here in the South are man-made, so that means that they have stuff under them. There are towns down there, there's churches, there's graveyards, there's all this stuff. And so that to me is just fascinating. Like all you have to do as an author is kind of describe this lake and suddenly you have this spooky place. So that's kind of where I started with it. The other part is there's an area here close by Atlanta. It's in Highlands, Cashiers area of North Carolina. And it's a place of gorgeous beauty. These beautiful, mountains and this small town. People have lived there forever are people like Charlotte, my main character. So they don't really have that much wealth, but they've grown up there for generations. And then you have the people who have come in and transformed these towns into like kind of a resort. And there are golf courses and restaurants and all this stuff. So you have this really interesting mix of like the insiders who've lived there for generations who don't really have that much money. And then you have very moneyed people who have come in. And that just got me thinking, it's so interesting. Like, what if I've married those two people? And then on top of all this, suspense around this body that's found floating in the lake, you have these money issues. So Charlotte, when, her husband looks like he might be hiding something, she really doesn't want him to be hiding something because that would mean that she would have to go back to the place she came from. So she has all this extra motivation to really want him to be innocent.
Were you plot first or characters first, or how does that work for you when you want to set it at the lake, and you grew up near there, and so it. So then what happens?
So I typically, like, the first thing is I come up with a premise, and I just this premise hit me, and then I start filling in, coming up with an outline, and I really plot it out before I write the first word. So typically it's mostly first plot, and then I kind of backdoor my characters in because I'm thinking about like who are the people that I could put in a situation that would have the hardest time with it. Because that's really what a story is about, right? It's about people overcoming these obstacles to whatever it is they're trying to achieve.
So in suspense, we all know that like the twist is always so important, and you are the master of the twist, by the way. So do you know your twist or twists before you write the book, or do they come as you're going, or what? Tell us about that. Oh.
So I typically, did I fall
You're
away?
there. No, you're there. It was frozen but you're fine.
Okay. So I know the twist going in. I spend a lot of time thinking through my twists, and when I say I plot out like chapter by chapter, scene by scene. So when I sit down to write, I know every single day when I sit down what I'm supposed to write for that day. And if I go back, and I typically do that at the end, I look at my plot and I go back and look at my outline and see what's changed. And typically not tons has changed. I mean, even in, my other stories, they've all kind of stayed the same, including the ending, especially the ending, actually.
All right, I was going to ask you if your endings ever changed once you got into the edit process, but no, they've all stayed.
Yeah,
that's
single one of them. Yeah,
that's a testament to you, because they're like, man, we can't do it better than Kimberly. We're just going to leave Kimberly's.
Well, thank you. Yeah, even I some things change as I'm writing. Like in The Marriage Life, for example, I added a character that I didn't have in my outline, and it turned out to be a pretty important character for the story. But really, I mean, the chapters might shift a little, and little things might change, but the big plot points, they've always stayed pretty much the same.
I mean, it's fascinating. It's always so fascinating to hear how different all of our processes are.
Right?
I mean,
Yeah.
the books all end up out in the world, but they go through such a different journey. I just saw something.
I have a question.
Yeah,
I have
I
a
was going to
question.
say I thought something pop up.
Yeah, I said it, but I was on mute. I'm like, why is no one listening to me that I was on mute? From Lisa's asking, what are you?
Not me.
Well, yeah, not Lisa Steinke. Lisa Welsh is asking, what are you currently reading and any books that you'd recommend?
Ooh.
Well, I read y'all's book. It's fabulous. I loved it.
Thank you.
So that's number one. It's coming out what, in a couple weeks,
July
right?
14th. Soon.
And then and in my genre, like the domestic suspense, Heather Gudenkauf's latest, This Is How I Lied.
Yeah, my husband just finished that and he loved it. I actually meant to take a picture of him reading it because he was so intent and badly reading it.
Yeah,
So.
it's really good. It's really good. And then, yeah, I'm currently reading a story now by Kennedy Ryan. It's a romance. She's a friend of mine here in Atlanta, but she hit USA Today out of the gate. It's called Queen Move. And
that's awesome.
Yeah.
When you're writing a book, just since we're talking about your book, what you're reading, when you're writing a book, do you read? And if so, do you read in your genre, or do you try to stay away from your genre?
I read for sure. I'm always reading. I typically don't have any problems reading in my genre when I'm writing. I don't necessarily stay away from it, but I do like an occasional break and read something that's kind of outside my domestic suspense genre, just to give my brain a break, because it is a different way of reading. Because when I'm reading in my genre, I'm reading and also looking at how they did it, and thinking about story and thinking about, technique and craft and all those things. And when I read in a different genre, it's easier for me to put all that aside and just read for pleasure.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but that would be true. Because as a reader of suspense, but because I think I'm an author and we've written suspense, I'm like thinking about it the whole way through too. Like what's going to happen, and I'm trying to figure it out. And I know a lot of just readers do that too, but I hadn't really thought about it in that way until you said that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And don't you love it when, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
What's that?
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, don't you love it when you find one of those books that you read and then you are reading it and you think, oh, I want to go back and like take it apart and see how they did it. I love that. And so you read it first for pleasure, and then you go back and you just like pull it apart and take notes and learn.
Find all the breadcrumbs that they left along the way that you didn't see the first time, which I think is always a mark of a really good, great novel. Holly's asking, when you're working on a book, do you ever spook yourself out? And she's saying in parentheses, from someone scared of everything.
I think part of it is that because I've like already thought it out before I start writing, it's really me just writing the story. So maybe I spook myself out when I'm coming up with the outline. And people ask me that a lot about 3 Days Missing, which was the story about the missing child. And I said, I always say I could never have written that book when my kids were little. By the time I wrote it, my kids were bigger. So I'm kind of choosing situations maybe where I'm a little bit removed from it, that I can put that space between me and the story as I'm writing it. But yeah, sometimes coming up with the outline can freak me out. Like the story I'm writing now is about a home invasion. It happens all the time here in Atlanta.
Ooh, see, just the home invasion, like it makes me feel chills. Like last night I set my alarm and then I still felt like I was hearing things when my husband's not here, and it's just great. Like when he's not here and it's just my daughter and I and the dogs, who would not be good guard dogs at all. I still double check on that stuff. So like, just hearing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's scary. Yeah. So I read that you did, so you've, obviously the lake is a big part of this, and diving is also a big part. So tell us about the research you did for those scenes.
Well, so going back to like spooking yourself out, like diving to me is one of the scariest things in the world. I don't even like snorkeling because
Neither do I. Yes. Yes.
The idea of being down water and like animals and fish and scary things coming at you, that freaks me out. So that part did freak me out. And especially as I was doing my research around lake diving, which lakes are typically very dark and they're very murky water, especially here in the South where it's a lot of clay. And so it's just gunk. You can't see anything. And so that definitely freaked me out. I did not, some authors actually go and like do the things that they're writing about, but I was like, no way, we're going to have to get this one from the research.
Yeah, I'm with you. I would not be doing that thing.
I was on a panel with Matthew, I think it's Matthew Quirk, right? Lisa, and he like had someone kidnap. He writes great books, you guys, if you haven't read him. But he like had someone come kidnap him to see if he could escape. And I was like, wow, we just like went to Tulum to like see how the water temperature felt. Like it was, woo! Like it was. And then the other author on the panel, and her name is escaping me. Like she like locked herself in some box, like to see if her body would fit in. Like, oh no, it was a suitcase. Very upset.
My God!
I was very upset.
That just makes me, but you did such a good job with it. Like when I was reading it, I could just see him like getting out of the water and like how you described all of that. I felt like I was there. I mean, so you did. And I felt like I could picture the house because the dock is just down from the house and I could see everything. So you did such a good job with the scene. I mean, that's gotta be so important to you because you started with where you wanted to set the book, right?
Yeah, and and I knew going in that the lake was going to be basically another character. I knew it was that important to the story. So I did, I kind of set it geographically at a certain spot, but there's really not a lake exactly there. I kind of made up the lake because I wanted a lake where they were using the water for transportation. The town was set on the edge of the lake because I knew it was that important to the story. So I definitely did a little bit of liberty taking with that. But yeah, it was just such a big part of the story. I knew I needed to make it exactly the way it was in my head.
And the house with the big windows and like people could see, I could just feel it, and then when he was gone and she was there by herself, I was happy the brother was there for a while.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, you guys have to read this. It's really good. Let's see. I wanted to ask you also about the cover, and I know you have it, so definitely hold it up. What is the story behind that, or what was your involvement? Because it's really good.
Thank you. Yes, I am.
Sorry, I'm making you move back. Liz has it too. Because now you're going to go back to the, yeah.
The cover, yeah. So when I write a book, I have decided that I am really bad at titles, and that's because not one of my titles have actually stuck. And, I'm fortunate to be with a publisher that has like such a great department doing, thinking about the marketing, the placement, all those things. And so they come up, my editor and I really, mostly my editor, comes up with the title. I turned the book in as book number 6. And she came up with the title, the tagline. They did the cover, which, the first attempt I saw at the cover was almost exactly this. They just hit it right out of the park right away. So I have very little to do with that part of the story or that part of the process, but they're so good at it that I just kind of like.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's just like, it says it, but it makes you're like, okay, I need to know what went on.
And there. The boat and the spooky letters, and they really really.
It's nice when you have a cover and it just works, because that's so much of it, right? As an author, just when you're putting your book out there in the world, because that's like the first thing they're either going to click on or pick up at a bookstore. So to have that peace of mind that you really like
magical
your cover.
almost. I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's almost like a magical thing. It's like the title, the cover, the colors, the everything, the back cover blurb, it all has to work together to be, you know, like this perfect thing. And yeah, they just
yeah. And so what was the title? I'm just curious. Do you remember the title you had in your head before?
Book number 6.
Just book 6. You don't even go there. You're just like, okay.
I used to spend some time thinking about it, and then, you know, they all got shot down for really good reasons. You know, they're looking at what the market is doing. They're looking at, you know, all the things that make a reader want to pick up a book. And all I'm thinking about is, does it match my story?
Yeah, it's marketing. It's not in writing, for sure. It's like two totally different.
I think so
it's
too.
A skill to think
Are
of.
Your titles, did yours stick? Do you pick them?
It's like sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. Like How to Save a Life, Lisa went in and researched songs that were in that time period where Dawn and Mia first met. And because he was already saving her life. So when she sent the list, it was so obvious like what the title should be. And then we went back and tied the song into it. But we definitely had some titles switched out. The Good Widow was like 5,000 other titles before it was The Good Widow. And I think our agent came up with it. We went around for a while. You know how sometimes you'll have it and then you're not sure. And so like there's 80 titles that go around on an email chain and you end up right back where I feel like we were kind of there. And our very first book, we were calling The Toast. But I remember the publisher at the time said that they just thought of toast, like in a toaster.
Yeah, like sourdough toast.
Yeah, so and it went to Your Perfect Life was a much better title for it. And we didn't know what they toasted at one point in the book, so we thought it would be a good title.
We've got some comments over here in the chat. Chris is saying, I loved your characters in this book. They were so realistic. I was loving and hating them like real people. Faye's character was Chet and Paul. Rubbed me the wrong way right from the beginning. Do your character bios, or do they just come to you? And then Leslie is also saying, Kimberly Bell's name is on it. You know it's going to be good. Then we'll go back to this question.
So do I do character bios? I not officially on paper. I don't really write them out. I don't like look for pictures or anything, but I do think about who they are and what their backstory is for sure. I work with this software and they have like this gorgeous little template for it with, you know, pictures and birth dates and all that stuff. I don't go that much into detail. For me, it's more like, do I have a feel for the character? Do I know what motivates them? You know, and then a lot fills in as I'm writing. My outline that I was talking about earlier is very plot focused. And so as I'm writing, I go much deeper into the characters. But yeah, I love that Chris loved them. Yeah, Chet was kind of my favorite character too. He was a fun character to write. He was one of those, he's the brother of my main character, and he's one of those, he's not super smart, bookish smart, but he's very people smart, and he just kind of says what's going through his head, and that's always fun to write.
Yeah, I liked him too, and I liked their dynamic a lot, and just how it all came together, which you guys will have to read.
Yeah,
to know what I'm talking about.
You do a really good job with characters, Kimberly, and I know in Dear Wife, I'm really picky. I think everyone is, but I'm particularly picky about narratives. I mean, I can pick up a book and within 3 chapters, I just know like if I'm into the narrative or not. And like with Dear Wife, which was, for those of you who don't know, was her book that came out last year that I highly recommend. I picked it up and I actually called Lisa or texted her something and I said, I'm gonna love this book. I love this woman's narrative from the get-go. So I think that is definitely a gift that you have.
Well, thank you. That means a lot coming from another author.
Aw.
Oh, thank you. Chris is
yeah.
saying he's what I would want in a weird situation, entertaining and helpful. Like talking about
Chet.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Chet.
Yeah, for sure. He's I liked him.
I think it's important, especially like, I put my characters through so much hell that it's important to give them somebody who's, going to be there for them and who the reader knows is on their side and who's maybe a little entertaining as well. And just kind of, tells her, he's kind of the person on her shoulder telling her, what he really thinks and kind of helping her along. And those are the characters that are fun to write too.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever so are you one of those authors that just has a bunch of ideas lying around and you're like, can't even get to them all? Or are you just idea book?
Pretty much the second. I do have a list of ideas, but by the time it's time for me to actually sit down and propose them, I've kind of gotten over them. You know how you're like, have a running list of ideas? I'm sure you do too, right?
No.
You just like,
we used to,
no?
and then I feel like we've used them all, and now
we have, and now we're idea book. But I kind of like being like that though, because then you're just thinking about, once you come up with it, that's all. I mean, you're just thinking about it, but the coming up with it part takes a while.
That's hard, yeah. And also the market changes. So like the idea that I had 3 years ago is maybe no more relevant, or somebody has already done it. I just had that actually with Catherine McKenzie. Have you read her newest?
Oh yeah, it's really good.
You Can't Catch Me. So I read it back in, I think, January, right around the time I was proposing the book that I'm writing now. And one of my proposals was her almost exact premise.
Wow. Really? That's interesting.
And so I finished her book, and I emailed my editor the next day. I was like, that third proposal, take it off the table because I just read that book.
Wow. It's a great really book. Interesting.
And Paramount just bought that.
I saw that.
Adaptation. Yeah. Lisa Welsh has a question. She's asking, what does a typical writing day look like for you?
So I typically am a morning writer. I get up and go straight behind the computer. My commute is from my bedroom down to my living room. And then I get behind my computer, and I usually give myself like an hour to warm up with like social media and emails and things like that. And then I'm writing by typically 8:30, and write. I usually go for word counts. So I mean, it just depends. Some days I'll hit it by, 1 or 2. Some days it takes me all day. So I like a big block of writing time. So I'll go until I hit my word count, and then I go back to, social media and all the million other things that we have to do as authors.
Right.
But I'm not a really fast writer. I don't write tons of words in a day. I can't pound out, thousands of words. My sweet spot is usually 700 to 1,000 words in a day.
And are those typically words that you'll keep? I mean, I know it's hard to say, but sounds like you take your time with them. Do you keep those words?
Yes, almost always. I mean, I'll finesse them and I'll massage them, and they'll change some in the drafts as it gets closer to the final draft. But most always I keep my words. I don't throw tons away.
Yeah, I mean, that's so nice. That's amazing. Well, you're a pro. You're just a total pro. So I'm not. This does not surprise me with how well executed your books are. Just I can never figure out. It's annoying, but I can never figure out the end.
Oh, thank you.
And it's I can, and a lot of not with you. That's why I said.
And you, Lisa, you loved the end of The Marriage Line. I hadn't read it yet when it first came out, and you called me and you're like, the ending of The Marriage Line. And I finally read it. I was like, fine, I'm gonna read it because you kept talking about it.
That was a good ending. And I did not see that coming. So.
Well, and we were talking before about do my endings change, and I went back and looked at my outline for that, and that was in there. It was exactly that ending. Although I will say I had one little extra scene, just a teeny tiny scene afterwards, but as soon as I wrote that ending, I was like, nope, Dan's here.
Yeah. I can't imagine anything being after that.
Yeah.
That was good. That was really good. What is it? What you mentioned you're writing something now. Can you talk about it at all?
I'm still so deep in the throes of it. I can't really talk much more than what I said, but like I said, it's a story about a home invasion.
Mm-hmm.
It's a man who forces the way into the house with the mother, and she has a couple kids, and
it's going to come out when?
I think it's scheduled for fall 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's okay. I can't wait. I can't wait. Do we still have time for more questions, Liz?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I've got, we talked about editing and all of that. And we talked about authors' books. Do you have any unpublished manuscripts in your drawer?
I was hoping, I was looking here. I'm like, I hope she asked that
or
one.
have they all made it out?
I have probably some unfinished partials.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I have a whole.
And what happened with those? Did you just get like 30,000 words in and you're like, this isn't working, or you wrote yourself into a corner, or what happened with those?
They're typically stories that just die out for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking back, I'd have to go back and look on my computer screen, but one of them for sure was before I figured out that I need to plot out things. Like, that's just how my brain works. I know that I need to plot things out. So one of those just kind of died out because I didn't plot it out. Another one was one I started and then put down when a better idea came to me. Maybe I'll go back and pick it up. I don't know. Like I said, with my ideas too, after a while, you're just kind of over them.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm over them, then that's never a good sign, right? So, but I always consider it as practice. I mean, don't you?
Yeah,
well, right.
For sure. Yeah, you got to find the silver.
Yeah,
and every failure makes you better. We've got a couple questions here. Chris is asking, would you ever write a novel in another genre, or even within mystery, i.e. romantic, suspense, or historical mystery?
I never say never, but anything with romance seems really hard to me, like to write, like technically, because I think that's the hardest. I mean, plot is one thing, but like the emotional connection, the build, and like, that, I don't know, that seems really hard to me.
And you've got the domestic suspense thing down.
Yeah, you read about some bad husbands, girl.
You've got your lane. So
I know. And the funny thing is, I've been married forever and happily married. And, everybody's always like, where does this come from? I just do not know.
I know. That was my next question. How does your husband feel about you writing about these terrible men that these women are married to?
Right? Especially with the marriage lie. He's like, what? And I actually get a lot of readers who call me and say, giving me the side eye. I have something to tell them when they're reading it.
Right. Holly has a question too. She says, is there a method to keeping details or stories from real life, or ones that come to mind randomly, such as a notes file or random scribbles in a notepad?
So like for writing,
you're breaking up a little bit.
Really?
Hold on. Let's see. Why don't you start that one over? Let's see how your connection is.
Is it better?
Yeah, it's much better. Yeah.
I have a gazillion notebooks going at one time. I typically have, for every story I write, I have a notebook that I just write random stuff in, ideas, a list for me as I'm going back through and doing my edits. I don't really have a great method though, guys. Like, do you use Evernote or anything like that?
Girl, we are so behind. We use like the notes on like our phones, and I make her share it, but or maybe like a
You
note.
used to have a notebook that you had in your purse.
I keep a notebook in my
Right.
purse and take a picture of it and send it to her. We're very low tech
Old
over
school.
here.
Yeah, there's no Evernote going on. Although I
Oh.
do know what that is.
We've got a question from Leslie Jewell. Change of subject a little bit, but I love both Kimberly Bell's Belle of the Week and now your all's author interviews, and they amazingly support. Oh, the support we give other authors. Sorry, like what charities or nonprofits do we support that are very close to your heart? I'm gonna throw it to you, Kimberly.
Yeah. So, and I think you said this in my bio, this is kind of my second career. And before I was writing, I worked in nonprofit fundraising mostly. So I have a bunch of nonprofits that I worked for that are very close to my heart, but have nothing to do with writing or books, but I'm going to call them out here. So when I worked for Habitat for Humanity for a really long time, got to build a bunch of houses all over the world. And that is a fabulous charity. And they do great, amazing work. If you can ever do a, what do they call them? Where you go to another country and you build a house. So like in Guatemala or wherever you want to go.
Like the mission or
like it's,
yeah.
They don't call it a mission trip. They have a name for
right.
it.
Yeah. Oh, they do.
Right.
Okay.
But it is the best way to learn about the organization and to like really experience another country, because you are like side by side building with the people who are going to live in that house. And it's a fabulous organization. Another one is the YWCA, who I work for here in Atlanta. And they're about empowering women and eliminating racism, two really big causes that are close to my heart. So
Absolutely.
both of those I can highly recommend.
Those are both great nonprofits. My brother works at nonprofits, and for years he worked with the International Justice Mission, which actually goes into other countries and uses their governments and police forces to break up sex slavery rings. So support that. And also, I will say I do a lot of rescue. We're both big animal people, and I know like I Stand With My Pack is something we do. We work with a lot of rescue organizations and supporting them. And every time they have an Instagram story, I'm like PayPaling them money every time they've got like find a scrawny dog somewhere.
I love it.
But I know that those organizations are near and dear to our heart. So Kimberly, tell us, I know you're really active on social media. And for those of you that don't follow Kimberly, she does a great job. She has a lot of giveaways. So tell us everywhere we can find you, website, Instagram, Facebook, everything.
Right. So I'm everywhere. I'm on Instagram as Kimberly S. Bell. Same with Twitter, Kimberly S. Bell. And then Facebook, Kimberly Bell. You can find me everywhere. And then my website, which is KimberlyBellBooks.com. And all the links to all my socials are there too.
Great.
Awesome.
Yeah, and like I said, you do a really good job with your social media, so I highly recommend. And you guys can find us at Lisa and Liz on Instagram, or Liz Fenton and Lisa Stanky on Facebook, or you can find all of our links and all the event links to here at lizandlisa.com. I'm just pulling up the calendar for next week to see who we have. Okay,
I
so
can
next
move on to that if you
Julie's
want me
back.
to do that.
Julie, yes, please, Julie. I think there's
Julie's on video again. I was like, there she is.
Popping up. Kimberly, that was so great. It was so fun hosting you for this. And when we all can like gather up again and you're ever on the West Coast, please come and visit us.
I'd love that.
Yeah, I think it would be really great. So we have Kristen Howerton, Rage Against the Minivan. So I think that'll be good for all those moms that are out there raging against that minivan. And then Sarah Ackerman will be with us next Thursday. So we have another good week coming up next week. Again,
Yeah,
I put some books in on the chat. I actually put The Marriage Lie on there too. So you guys were talking about that one, and I thought, people might want to pop that one in their little cart.
It's really good.
Yeah.
And Chris
A
is
double
commenting.
feature.
Yeah, Chris is commenting down here that we're all amazing on IG. And as a reader and a viewer, it's very awesome. So thank you, Chris. And thank you, Kimberly. It's always, we adore you. We've, met you in person. We heart you. We heart your books. And so it's always just a pleasure to chat with you. And I hope you guys all pick up one of her books. It's well worth it. and for taking time to talk to us today. And we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.